Hello everyone, welcome to Titan Academy. In this business use case, we will demonstrate how to upsert an object. Alright, so this is our form, and what this form does is create a contact or update a contact depending if it exists via the email address. So let's publish this and see how this works, and then we'll break down the form part by part. Alright, so we see we have a new exist radio button. It's disabled, and we're viewing the contact ID hidden since in the form settings we have the debug mode show hidden fields checked. All right, so let's start with something that exists. Once I enter an existing email in one of the contacts, we can see we have the contact ID mapped and our radio button changes to exist. And there is multiple ways of doing this, upserting an object behind the scenes. You don't even have to show it on the screen. In this video, we broke it down so you can see how this process works. Let's say I change this here, and this doesn't exist in my Salesforce environment, and it's automatically changed to new. So from here, we can decide if it's new. If we don't have a contact ID, then we will create a new one for you. And if it exists, we will update the existing contact and push the pets that you've entered here. Another thing we've done here is to show you how you can dynamically control the section on the pet. And if we change it to 2, you can automatically add pets. And once we submit, it will be created or updated in Salesforce. We'll see this process once we've broken down the form. All right, so let's head over here. The first thing we'll do is take a look at our get. So we have a get contact by email, and let's take a look at the condition, and then we'll talk about the auto trigger. So our condition is very simple. Email on the contact object equals to the email on the form element email. And the reason that this get runs whenever the email changes, so if I'll change the email here again and make sure it's valid, we can see our get running again. The reason that that happens is because we did not tick the execute on form load or use a custom action. What happens with auto trigger is that whenever the field that you're looking at in our instance is an email, and you can also have multiple conditions here, whenever one of these changes, then your get will run automatically. And you can view this also by looking at the legend. So we can see this is onload, this is auto trigger, this is custom action. We have a bunch of videos covering these. So this will run whenever the email changes, our get will run. Let's take a look at our mapping. So our mapping is pretty simple. We have last name, contact ID to the contact ID hidden, and first name on the form as well. All right, so we have our get. Let's take a look at our push. This is where the interesting part is in this instance. So let's take a look at it. So it runs in a custom action, and we'll switch it in the end of the video to a submit as well. It's using custom action button, which means we have to invoke it for this to run. And the action is update. And what we're saying here, that if we do not find any match, that means we can't find for that condition that we'll see in a minute a match, then we will create a new one. Let's take a look at the condition. And the condition is very simple. And again, here we could rely on the email again. That's just for breaking down the process. We've done it this way. If we want to find the contact, where the contact ID on the contact objects equals to our contact ID hidden on the form. If we find it, then we will run an update. If we don't find it, we will create. Let's take a look at the mapping. Mapping here, very simple. We map last name, first name, and email, and that's that. You can also control what you want to use for an update or not. So for instance, if you have record types and stuff, or things you wouldn't want to update and you want to use it for create, then you can hit the configure and say, don't use for create, don't use for update, And then you can combine the upsert with specific elements that you want to map or you don't want to map. Okay, this is great. We've noticed that there is also a child object for this. Let's see what this does. So create a pet under the created contact. And we can see that this is a child of the contact update, which means once this is finished, we will go and create these guys. And since it's mapped to a section, then it could have multiple elements in it. Titan automatically recognizes it and it will create as many pets in our instance. This is a custom object, very simple objects, just one field and a lookup to the contact. And what we have in the mapping is pet name mapped to our pet name text box and the contact ID, which we were getting it from the first push. In our instance, we could also map it directly to our hidden contact ID and it will work just the same and we don't have to have it nested. In our instance, we will have it nested push, and once the contact push has finished, we will get all the contact information for that contact we just created, and you can map the pet contact lookup to the contact ID that we've just created. All right, let's take a look at some of the form logic. So the easiest way for us to find out which elements has logic in them is select the element, head over to the conditioning and click affected by. And from here, you can see all the conditioning that, all the conditions that affects this field. So in our instance, we see we have two conditions. We see we have set value to exists, and the owner is contact ID hidden FLD number 4, and set value to new contact ID. Again, the owner is the contact ID FLD4, and we can click show friendly condition, and we can see that if the contact ID is empty, then we're setting it to new, and if the contact ID is not empty, then we're setting it to exist. And you can also click configure condition, and that will take you to set condition for contact ID. And let's take a look at what we've done here. So I can just take a look at the map, and we can see we're setting the radio button to exist. And that contact ID is, if we'll take a look at the affected by, it's affected by the get. We're mapping it from the get. So once we find the contact, we're mapping the contact ID to the hidden from the get that we ran. And then if it exists, if it's not empty, then we're setting the radio button to exist. And if it's empty, then we're setting it to new. So that's perfect. We can also see that it's affected by a push, and it's used in the condition of the push. Since the conditions are set from here, we've seen it from the affected by, but you can also go here and you can see that there is a condition set, configure condition, and that's the exactly same screen that we've seen a second ago. So condition for contact ID, and we have the conditions that control the radio button. Let's move on and take a look at the email. We see we don't have any conditions affected by push and get. These are the mappings that we've seen earlier. Move on to the first name. Again, no condition. Affected by, push and get. We have no logic. Configure, again, no special logic here either. Let's move on to number of pets. And here we see we have a condition. So let's take a look at the condition we have here. Our condition is current field is not empty. Let's see the mapped. And we can see that the section, we're setting items on the section to the number of pets field we have over here. And this is what gives us the functionality of the below. So once we add 5, then it will set 5 items on the section, and so on and so forth. And you can also view it directly from here. So affected by, and we can see we have the set items coming from the number of pets and the FLD number, and you can see it directly from here, or configure the condition from here. So this gives you a great power to debug your form and see where all the functionality is coming from. Notice that we used here a bunch of sections, and the reason for these is that you can contain your elements within a section, and then if you need to hide and show certain elements, it's much easier to control it from within a section than configure each and every single one of your elements. In our instance here is used for styling as a container, and you can see we have a section in the back, and within it we have an image. All right, so let's see how this runs. So we'll save this, and then we will do a few tweaks to the form. And let's refresh this guy. And what we will do is add a new email. So CDO plus and it ran our get, but we've seen that there was a quick loading, and we don't want this to happen because this is a little bit disturbance. A little bit disturbs in the eye of the user. So let me show you how to clear this out. In our instances, it makes sense to do it. So what we will do over here is in our messages on our get, so this is the get contact that we've seen before, we will take off the disable form while loading. And let's see how this will affect our form. So I'll copy this and let's refresh. And I'll put the email in again, and we can see that we do not have our form block. It's just running in the background, which is really, really cool. All right, so let's move on. We'll do last, first, and let's do number of pets 3, and we'll do 1, 2, and 3. Great. Let's submit the form. And we can see we've been redirected. Let's take a look at our button here. So what we've done with this button, even though it's a submit, it's a Salesforce action button. And what the Salesforce action does in our instance, it invokes the push, the custom push that we have, the using custom action push. It tells it, please run when I click this button. We can see we have a redirect after finish, and we are redirecting to this page. Very, very simple page with just a thank you message. And here it is. This is exactly what happened. In a second, we'll change it to push, and we will show you how this runs from there as well. Okay, so let's take a look at our integration logs. So form, integration logs, and let's see what we see. All right, so we have a contact update or create. In our instance, it created the contact. And if we will take a look at the related, we can see 1, 2, 3, and we can see the details of the contact, what we mapped, the first name, last name, and the email. All right, let's head back to the form, and I'll show you something interesting. So what you've seen here, pet create, and you see a bunch of record IDs under one push. And the reason that that happened is because we optimized it to run a bulk push into Salesforce. What you save here is on API calls. Since we're creating all these pets in our instance, all these objects in one push call to Salesforce. And I'll show you how it would behave otherwise. So if I'll head back to the push, and I'll click the edit and the action, and I'll remove the bulk mode. This I've added to optimize my push, since I know that I can possibly create multiple objects. I'll hit apply, and I'll show you how this will behave differently. So we'll head back to the form, and we'll demonstrate the push, the update in the same time. So we will put in our email address. So let's grab directly from here. And let me clear out some of the windows here. Wonderful. I'll put this guy in. You can see that it exists in Salesforce. We have the first name and last name mapped, and let's do updated, and we'll do let's do 4 pets, and just to demonstrate what the bulk mode does. So that will be 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we will submit. Okay, let's just make sure our push got to Salesforce. And we can see that our last name was updated. And here is our pets. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Wonderful. Now, let's see what happened in the integration logs. So I'll head back to the integration logs and I will refresh. And you can immediately see the difference. So we created one contact, and instead of doing a bulk mode and pushing it in one call to Salesforce, what happened here is that we created 1, 2, 3, 4 in 4 separate calls. So this is a really special feature that you should consider when you're creating multiple records from a section. Now let's head back to the form and we will change it to a submit. Okay, so let's change this guy to submit, and we also have to alter the action. So this will run on a submit. I took off the custom action button. We can see that the legend color has changed and everything here stays the same. And we can do finish and save, and let's publish this, and let's put in a new email. We did not find it in Salesforce. Let's put in some first. We'll do from submit, number of pets 3, and we will submit, and this is what we get when we submit the form. We'll hit close, and let's take a look at our integration logs, and from here you can immediately see the difference between the custom action and the submit. So from the submit you always get a submission ID, which if you will click it, it will take you to see the submitted data. You can see everything from here, so you can see all the submission data, which means the data was saved on Titan as well, and it also gives you an option to resubmit. If you still want to use the submit without saving the data, you can go to form settings, optimization, and we have don't save the data. And anything on the video here, you've seen a bunch of question marks everywhere, and what this will give you is if you click the question mark, it will take you to a quick video of what that feature does. And this is how it's done.